The night split open above Sag Harbor like glass under a hammer. Lightning flashed over the dark Atlantic, and wind screamed through the masts of docked sailboats. Daniel Brooks, in his soaked white shirt, looked at his pregnant wife, Emily Carter, standing trembling near the stern of their small day sailor. Her belly rose under her loose coat, 7 months along, heavy with their first child. The storm had come fast, like all the truths she'd ignore. "Daniel, we should go back," she shouted over the roaring waves. He didn't answer. He was busy tying a wet nylon rope around the mast, his movements sharp, impotty. "You'll be safe here," he said finally, looping the rope around her wrists before she could understand. "You panic too easily, Em. I can't have you running off while I get help." Rain lashed her face. "What are you doing? Daniel, please." He avoided her eyes. "It's just for a few minutes." But she saw the boat waiting near the dock. A sleek motorboat, engine humming, and in its cabin a silhouette she knew too well. Vanessa Hale. The woman Daniel swore was just a client. Her blonde hair flashed when lightning struck again. She was holding Daniel's coat. Emily's pulse raced. She tried to pull free, but the rope bit deep into her skin. "Daniel, I'm pregnant." He flinched, maybe from guilt, maybe from thunder, but his jaw tightened. "I told you I'll come back. Don't make this harder." He climbed onto the dock, slipping once, catching himself. The wind howled like laughter. Vanessa's voice carried through the rain. "Come on, baby, the tide's rising." Emily's breath broke. "Please, Daniel." But he didn't look back. He ran toward the motorboat, clutching his phone. She saw him lift it, screen glowing, recording himself as he shouted over the storm. "We're trying to help people stuck out here. Stay calm, folks." He was filming a rescue video for followers for image, not for her. The boat's engine roared to life. Vanessa smiled, pressing close to him, a glitter of a Tiffany bracelet flashing in the light. Emily screamed his name, but it was lost to thunder and distance. The rope cut deeper as the water slammed against the hull. The wind whipped so hard she thought the mast would snap. Cold salt filled her mouth. She felt the baby kick once, desperate. She tried to loosen the knot, but Daniel had tied it tight, too tight. Her fingers went numb. Across the bay, in a cedar-sided house near the dunes, Michael Reyes looked out his window. The storm alert on his phone had woken him, but it was the flicker across the water that caught him. The faint blinking of an iPhone flashlight, SOS style, cutting through the blackness. His breath caught. He recognized that light. Emily's phone. Without thinking, he threw on a hoodie, grabbed a rope, and sprinted into the rain. The cold bit through him like knives, but he didn't stop. The docks rattled under his feet as he reached the shoreline. The waves were monstrous, white-topped, merciless. He saw the small boat tossing like a toy, a faint shape tied to the mast. "Emily," he shouted, but the wind swallowed his voice. He looked back once at his porch, the faint glow of his old Mont Blanc pen resting by the mailbox, the last piece of calm he'd touched, and then dove into the raging water. Behind him, Daniel's motorboat vanished into darkness, leaving Emily bound, gasping alone in the rising storm. And as the next lightning bolt tore across the sky, a single thought echoed in her chest. If no one saw her light, she and her child would disappear beneath the waves forever. The wind roared like an angry god, slamming waves against the small day sailor. Emily's fingers clawed at the rope, cutting her wrists, slick with seawater. Her breath came in short, ragged gasps. Every heartbeat thudded like a countdown. The mast creaked, the hull groaned, and the black Atlantic rose higher with every gust. Salt stung her eyes. Her hair stuck to her face, and all she could taste was fear. She whispered to the child inside her, voice trembling, "We'll be okay, baby. Just breathe with me." She tried to inhale slow. 4 counts, just like her mother had taught her for panic attacks, but the storm was louder than her thoughts. The next wave crashed over her head, and icy water poured down her collar. Her body shuddered violently. A flash of lightning tore across the horizon. For a second, she saw Daniel's motorboat far away, its running lights bobbing steadily toward a distant cove. Even through the wind, she could hear laughter. Vanessa's, the woman who wore Emily's life like a borrowed coat. Emily screamed, "Daniel," until her voice broke, but the sea only answered with thunder. Her numb hands fumbled at the knots. The rope had swollen from the rain, tightening more with every pull. Her wrists burned, her stomach clenched from the strain. "Please," she whispered again, not to Daniel anymore, but to the night itself. Across the bay, Michael Ray's tore through the darkness. Each step on the dock sounded like a hammer in his chest. The storm had swallowed the shoreline. He couldn't see more than 20 feet ahead. He kicked off his shoes, stripped his hoodie, and dove into the freezing water. The cold hit him like an electric shock, locking his lungs. But he forced himself forward, arms slicing through the surf, remembering every college swim meet, every breath measured between strokes. Lightning flashed again, revealing the distant sailboat tossing like a broken toy. He saw her, tiny, still, tied to the mast. "Emily!" he shouted, but his voice drowned in the wind. He pushed harder, the salt biting into his eyes. He thought of the day he met her, bright summer afternoon, her laughter echoing through a real estate open house Daniel had hosted. Back then, she'd smiled at him like sunlight. And now, she was out there, vanishing in the storm, because of a man who treated her love like a photo prop. The current slammed him sideways, dragging him under. He fought the instinct to gasp. He forced himself up again, coughing seawater. His muscles screamed, but he didn't stop. "Hold on, Emily," he muttered, every word a vow. Emily's world tilted. The boat jerked violently, slamming her shoulder into the mast. Pain shot through her arm, but it was distant compared to the cold gripping her spine. Her phone light, wedged near her feet, blinked weakly. One more wave and it would go out. She closed her eyes and saw her mother's kitchen, the smell of warm bread, laughter, safety. "Stay awake," she told herself. "You can't fall asleep." Then she heard something, faint, impossible, a man's voice through the storm. "Emily!" Her eyes snapped open. A shape was cutting through the waves toward her, arms strong, deliberate. Hope flared so bright it hurt. She tried to call back, but her voice was gone. Tears mixed with the rain. Michael reached the side of the boat, lungs on fire. "It's me! Hold on!" he yelled. She turned her head weakly, disbelief flooding her features. He grabbed the rail and tried to climb, but a wave slammed him back into the sea. He swallowed water, spat, and lunged again. His fingers finally found purchase on the slippery hull. "Don't move," he gasped. She laughed, half sob, half shock. "Can't exactly go anywhere." The next lightning strike illuminated them both. The man who refused to give up, and the woman bound to survive. As thunder cracked above, Michael wrapped one arm around the mast, looked into her terrified eyes, and made the decision that could cost him his life. He wasn't leaving without her. Michael slammed against the hull, gasping for air as icy waves clawed at him. His arms trembled from exhaustion, but he refused to let go. The wind howled in his ears like a living thing, drowning every thought except one, Emily. She was there, bound, soaked, her face pale as moonlight under the flashing storm. Her eyes widened when she saw him clinging to the side of the boat. "Michael?" she whispered, voice thin as a thread. "Yeah," he shouted, his breath tearing in his chest. "I'm here. I've got you." He hoisted himself over the rail, water streaming from his clothes. The deck lurched violently beneath him. The rope binding Emily's wrists had swollen tight, biting into her skin. He crawled to her, fingers stiff and blue, fumbling with the knot. The rope resisted, wet and unyielding. "It's okay," he said, voice calm even as his teeth chattered. "Just stay with me." Emily shook her head weakly. "You shouldn't be here. It's too dangerous." He almost laughed. "Yeah, well, I was never good at watching people drown." The next wave slammed the side of the boat, nearly tossing them both overboard. Michael wrapped an arm around her to keep her steady, his heart pounding against her back. The rope slipped through his fingers, the knot loosening slightly. He worked faster. His fingertips were numb, but he used the edge of a small metal clip from his belt to dig under the cord. Finally, it gave way with a sharp snap. Her wrists came free, red and raw. She gasped in relief, holding her belly protectively. He untied the rest of the rope around her waist, then helped her sit up. "Can you move?" She nodded weakly. "I think so." "Good," he said, looping an arm under her shoulders. "Because we're not dying out here." Lightning split the sky, blinding white. For a moment, Michael saw the motorboat again in the distance, Daniel's, cutting through calmer water near the cove. He felt a spark of rage flare through his exhaustion. That man had left her here to die, to stage a perfect lie for his social media followers. The boat tilted hard. Michael grabbed the mast to steady them both. "Hold on to me," he ordered. Emily wrapped her trembling hands around his neck, her body weak but determined. He took one deep breath and looked at the churning black water. "We're going in together," he said. "What if we don't make it?" she asked softly. He looked at her, rain running down his face. "Then we don't make it apart." The next wave hit, and they jumped. Cold enveloped them instantly, the sea swallowing every sound. The shock nearly froze Emily mid-motion, but Michael's arm tightened around her waist. "Kick, Em. Kick toward the light." She obeyed, legs heavy, lungs burning. Somewhere behind them, thunder cracked again, shaking the sky. The day sailor's mast snapped like a toothpick, crashing into the waves. They swam through broken debris, planks, ropes, a floating oar. Emily's strength faltered, and she slipped under for a second. Michael dove, pulling her up again. "Stay with me," he shouted, voice hoarse. She coughed, choking on salt, eyes half closed. "I can't," she murmured. "Yes, you can," he said fiercely. "You're stronger than you think." A distant buoy light flickered through the storm. He fixed his eyes on it, using it as his North Star. "Almost there," he whispered. Emily clung to his shirt, her body trembling uncontrollably. "Michael," she said between gasps, "why would you risk your life for me?" He didn't hesitate. "Because yours matters more than mine." They reached the buoy, gripping the cold metal ring as the storm screamed around them. For a moment, they just hung there, alive but fragile, breathing in sync. Michael pressed his forehead to hers. "We're gonna make it," he said. And in that moment, between thunder and lightning, between betrayal and survival, something shifted. Emily felt the first spark of hope she'd had in months, right as a flash of light revealed Daniel's boat turning back toward them. Not for rescue, but for something darker. The world returned in fragments, white ceilings, antiseptic air, and a slow, rhythmic beeping that sounded like a heartbeat outside her body. Emily blinked against the light. Her throat burned, her skin stung, and for a moment she didn't remember where she was. Then came the rush of memory, the rope, the cold, Michael's voice cutting through the storm. She turned her head and saw him sitting beside her bed, soaked clothes replaced by a hospital gown and borrowed sweatpants. His hair was still damp. His eyes were closed, exhaustion carved deep into his face. A small paper cup of coffee sat untouched in his hands. He looked like a man who had fought death and barely won. "Michael?" she croaked. His eyes opened instantly. Relief flickered through them. "Hey," he whispered, leaning forward. "You're safe. You're at Southampton Memorial. They said you were hypothermic but stable." Baby's heartbeat strong. Her eyes filled. "The baby's okay?" He nodded, strong as ever. She exhaled a sound somewhere between a laugh and a sob. Her hands trembled as she reached for him. He hesitated only a second before taking her hand gently. "You pulled us out of the water," she said. "I couldn't let you go," he replied quietly. The door opened. A nurse walked in, efficient and kind, checking monitors. "Your husband said he might come by soon," she said casually. Emily froze. My husband." Before Michael could speak, the door swung wider. Daniel stood there, immaculate despite the storm that had nearly killed her. His hair was damp but styled, shirt crisp, smile rehearsed. "Baby," he said, voice dripping with practiced concern, "you scared me half to death." Michael's jaw tightened. He rose slowly, muscles tense. Daniel gave him a look, dismissive, territorial. "I didn't know you'd called anyone," he said to Emily, though his tone accused her of something more. Emily's lips trembled. "He saw the light. He saved me." Daniel forced a smile. "Of course he did. Thank you, man. Appreciate it." He reached out a hand, but Michael didn't take it. Daniel turned back to Emily, brushing imaginary hair from her forehead. "Storm came out of nowhere. I went for help, but my boat's engine stalled. You must have panicked." Michael's voice was low but sharp. "She didn't panic. She was tied to a mast." Daniel's face didn't change, but his eyes flickered for a second. Guilt, then calculation. "That's ridiculous," he said lightly. "She must have gotten tangled. It was chaos." Emily wanted to scream, but fear held her still. She looked at the nurse, who had paused mid-chart, confusion knitting her brow. "We'll let you rest," Daniel said, pressing a kiss on her forehead she didn't want. "You need peace, not drama." He stepped out, pretending to talk with the nurse in the hall, voice pitched just loud enough for others to hear. "She's been under stress lately, pregnancy, hormones, it's been tough." Emily's stomach nodded. He was rewriting the truth already. Michael sat back down, his face tight. "We can't let him control this," he said softly. "Not again." Her tears spilled. "They'll twist everything. No one will believe me." He shook his head. "Then we find someone who will." From the hall, Daniel's voice rose, friendly and false. "I'm just glad she's okay," he said to a doctor. "She's emotional. You know how pregnancy can be." Michael's fists clenched. He wanted to hit him. Instead, he picked up a pen from the bedside table, a cheap hospital one, and began writing Daniel's words down, verbatim on a napkin. "Evidence," he murmured. Emily stared at him, realizing that this man, dripping wet hours ago, was now the only anchor she had left. Daniel's shadow moved across the doorway again, smiling for the nurses. Charming, invincible. But as he left the room, Michael caught the faintest reflection in the window. Daniel's cold eyes meeting his, and knew this wasn't over. The real storm was just beginning. Morning light filtered weakly through the blinds, painting thin gold lines across the sterile hospital room. Emily sat propped against the pillows, a faint bruise forming on her wrist where the rope had cut her. She traced the mark absently, trying to decide if it was proof or shame. Michael sat beside her bed, his expression calm but unreadable. He'd barely slept, one foot always tapping, like his mind refused to stop working. The door opened. Daniel entered with a bouquet of white lilies and that perfect politician smile he'd mastered years ago. His hair was neat, his shirt freshly pressed, as if last night's storm had never touched him. "You look beautiful," he said softly, setting the flowers down. "I've been worried sick." Emily didn't answer. A doctor stepped in behind him, clipboard in hand. "Mrs. Brooks," he said, "we just need a few details for our report. You were found unconscious near the Sag Harbor docks. Can you tell us what happened?" Daniel jumped in before she could speak. "It was terrible," he said, voice smooth. "She panicked during the storm. She's been anxious lately. The pregnancy's been rough." He placed a comforting hand on her shoulder that made her skin crawl. "I tried to help her onto the boat, but the waves pulled it loose. I had to get to shore for help." Michael's jaw tightened. "That's not what happened." Daniel turned, tone still polite but edged. "Excuse me?" Michael stood. "She didn't panic. You tied her up. I saw the marks before the doctors did." The room froze. The doctor looked between them. Daniel laughed softly, the sound rehearsed. "Tied her up? That's absurd. Why would I ever do that?" Michael stepped forward. "Because you needed her out of the way." Daniel's voice dropped. "Watch yourself, buddy. You don't know what you're implying." Emily's heart pounded. The doctor cleared his throat awkwardly. "We'll just note the injuries for now," he said, leaving quickly to escape the tension. When the door closed, Daniel leaned closer to Emily, his whisper like ice. "You really want to embarrass yourself like this? You think anyone will believe some wild story from a soaked millionaire who's always had a crush on you?" Michael shot him a glare that could have cracked stone. "You left her to die," he said flatly. Daniel straightened, smoothing his shirt. "You really should go, Mr. Reyes. This is a family matter." Michael didn't move. "Not anymore." Daniel smirked. "We'll see." He turned to Emily, his tone suddenly gentle again. "I forgive you, honey. You've been through a lot. I'll handle the reporters." She blinked, confused. "Reporters?" He smiled faintly. "Storm coverage. My company's already getting calls. They want to know how we survived. I'll make sure your name stays out of it, unless of course you say something that hurts my reputation." Her stomach turned. He was already building the narrative. After he left, Emily buried her face in her hands. "He's going to twist it," she whispered. "He'll make me look unstable." Michael sat beside her again. "Then we find proof before he finds his story." She looked up at him, tears burning her eyes. "How?" "He controls everything. Money, media, people." "Not the truth," he said simply. "The truth still exists." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out the napkin he'd written on the night before. Daniel's exact words, scrawled in pen. "She's emotional. You know how pregnancy can be." Michael folded it neatly. "We start small," he said, "piece by piece." Emily nodded, her trembling slowing just a little. The baby kicked softly beneath her palm, reminding her she wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. Outside the hospital window, Daniel leaned against his silver Mercedes, talking on the phone, smiling for the cameras. Inside, Emily whispered, "He's already turning the world against me." Michael looked toward the glass, jaw set. "Then we'll make the world listen." The rain had stopped, but the air outside still smelled of salt and thunder. Emily sat on the edge of her bed that night, the hospital discharge papers still crumpled in her purse. Michael had driven her home, made sure the doors were locked and left only when she promised to rest. The house was silent now, too silent. Every room felt like it belonged to someone else. She walked to the fireplace where Daniel's framed awards lined the mantel, magazine covers, sales plaques, photos with celebrities. All smiles, all lies. Her reflection in the glass looked hollow. She remembered when she used to feel proud of those pictures. Back then, she believed the man standing next to her loved her, not his reflection beside her. A sudden vibration broke the silence. Her phone lit up. A message from Daniel. Don't talk to anyone. We'll fix this. Remember what's in the agreement. The agreement. Her stomach dropped. She went to the closet, reached behind a stack of shoeboxes, and pulled out a thin metal safe. The keypad beeped. Inside lay the prenup, crisp, white, untouched since the day she signed it. She unfolded the pages slowly, legal words blurred together, but one section stood out in yellow highlight. Any public claim or communication that may disparage the reputation, image, or character of the husband shall result in immediate forfeiture of all financial and marital assets. Her chest tightened. Daniel had written this clause himself after their first anniversary, when she was too in love to see what it really meant. He'd told her it was just protection from gossip. She'd trusted him. Now it was a weapon. Emily sat at the dining table, the paper trembling in her hands. He planned this, she whispered. He knew one day he'd need silence. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Michael's voice came through the door. It's me. She hesitated, then opened it. He held 2 takeout cups from Starbucks in a small brown bag. You didn't eat, he said. Soup and a sandwich, nothing fancy. She smiled weakly. You really shouldn't be here. He stepped inside. And let you sit in the dark alone? Not happening. She led him to the kitchen. He noticed the papers spread across the table, the prenup open like a wound. He picked it up carefully, scanning the page. He buried this clause on purpose, he said. It's intimidation, not law. Maybe, she said softly, but he has money, lawyers, and I have a baby. Michael set the paper down, his tone gentle but firm. You have truth, you have witnesses. The Coast Guard report alone shows you didn't fall overboard. She rubbed her wrist absently. He'll find a way to spin it. He always does. Michael pulled a chair beside her. Then we'll be smarter. We'll gather everything, texts, calls, the GPS data from his boat. We don't need to shout, we just need proof. Her eyes filled. Why are you doing this for me? He met her gaze. Because nobody fought for me when I needed it. I won't let you face this alone. For a long moment, they sat in silence, the storm outside replaced by the hum of the refrigerator. She looked at his hand resting near hers and saw the small scar on his knuckle, a reminder of a life that hadn't come easy. Finally, she whispered, I used to think strength meant keeping quiet. Michael shook his head. Strength is what you're doing right now, deciding you deserve better. She nodded slowly, wiping her tears. The baby kicked, firm and sure, as if agreeing. Michael stood. Get some rest. Tomorrow we start building your case. She followed him to the door. Michael, she said softly, thank you. He smiled, weary but certain. It's just the beginning, Emily. And Daniel? He's not untouchable. As his car disappeared down the street, she looked at the prenup one last time and whispered, Neither am I. Outside, a black Mercedes idled at the corner, headlights off, Daniel watching from the dark, his smile cold as the storm that hadn't really ended. The next evening, the wind carried the chill of the sea through the half-open window. Emily sat at her desk, scrolling through old messages on her phone, her stomach tightening with every word Daniel had ever sent, sweet lies that now read like warnings. Each I love you had an expiration date, and she had finally reached it. A text buzzed. Daniel, meet me at the office. We need to talk, alone. No drama. Her pulse quickened. Every instinct told her to ignore it, but she knew if she didn't go, he'd come to the house. And she didn't want Michael there if Daniel lost control. She slipped into a dark coat, pulled her hair into a loose bun, and left without turning on the porch light. Downtown Sag Harbor was quiet, just the glow of street lamps reflecting off puddles. Daniel's real estate office stood at the corner, glass walls gleaming under the moonlight. Inside, the lobby lights were dimmed, only his office glowing in back. She could see him pacing, phone in hand. When she opened the door, the smell of his cologne hit her, expensive, overpowering. He turned, smile sharp and false. You came, he said. I'm here, she replied evenly. Say what you need to say. He walked toward her, hands in his pockets. You've made things complicated. By not dying, she shot back. His smile faltered, then returned. Don't be dramatic, Em. You know how people love to twist stories. If you go around saying crazy things, it won't end well for either of us. She crossed her arms. You tied me to that boat. He laughed softly. Do you hear how that sounds? No one will believe you. You were disoriented, scared. You'll sound unstable. And that prenup? He tapped his temple. Signed, sealed, airtight. Her heart pounded. You'd ruin the mother of your child to protect yourself? He leaned in close, voice dropping to a hiss. You're carrying my air. That's all that matters. Keep your mouth shut, smile for the cameras at the Plaza Gala, and this all disappears. You'll have your perfect life again. Our life. She stared at him, seeing clearly for the first time. The man she once loved wasn't human anymore. He was a brand wearing a wedding ring. Why the gala? She asked quietly. He smiled wider. Because image, my darling, is everything. You and I standing together in front of Manhattan's finest. That'll kill the rumors before they start. And the investors love a redemption story. She felt a tremor of fear but masked it with calm. Fine, the gala, she said. I'll do it. He nodded, smug. Good girl. Then she added softly, but only if Vanessa's there too. His smile froze. Why would she? You'll find a reason, she interrupted. Otherwise I won't show. He stared at her, searching for weakness, but she met his gaze without flinching. Finally, he exhaled. You've changed. She lifted her chin. Maybe I finally learned from you. He turned away, annoyed, and that was her moment. She reached into her coat pocket, pressing the side of her phone where the voice memo app glowed red. Every word, every threat, captured. When he faced her again, his mask was back on. You'll regret crossing me, he said lightly, as if discussing dinner reservations. I already regret loving you, she replied. She walked out before he could answer. The night air hit her like freedom and fire. At the curb, Michael waited in his car, engine idling. She opened the door and sank into the seat, shaking. He glanced at her face and didn't ask questions. Got it? He said quietly. She held up the phone. Every word. He smiled grimly. Then he just signed his own confession. She looked back at the glass office behind them, Daniel still pacing inside. No, she whispered. He signed his own ending. Outside, lightning flashed again over the harbor, as if the sea itself remembered what he'd done. And wasn't finished with him yet. The next morning broke gray and quiet, the kind of silence that feels heavy, like the world is holding its breath. Emily sat at the kitchen table, a mug of lukewarm tea untouched beside her. Her phone sat screen up, the recording from last night saved under one simple title, Daniel. She replayed the first few seconds, his voice calm, manipulative, unmistakable, and her stomach turned. Michael arrived just after sunrise, bringing a bag of bagels and a determined calm that steadied her nerves. Eat something, he said, setting the food down. You'll need strength for today. She gave him a faint smile. I don't think I've eaten since the hospital. Then today's the day you start, he said gently. He sat across from her, pulled out a sleek silver laptop, and opened a folder labeled Evidence. Inside were subfolders, text messages, voice memos, marina footage, Vanessa's social posts, everything meticulously cataloged. Leah's on her way, he added. Leah? My lawyer, he explained. You'll like her. She doesn't lose. An hour later, the doorbell rang. Leah Kim stepped in, mid-30s, confident, her hair tied neatly, wearing a charcoal blazer and practical heels. She shook Emily's hand warmly. You've been through hell, she said. Now let's make it count. They sat together at the table while Michael poured coffee. Leah listened as Emily described everything, from the rope to the threats to the gala plan. When Emily played the recording, Leah's brow lifted slightly, a spark of satisfaction in her eyes. He incriminates himself 3 times in less than 5 minutes, she said. That's gold. But the prenup, Emily began. Leah waved a hand. Forget the prenup. It's void if we prove coercion or endangerment. A judge won't enforce a contract signed under manipulation, especially when there's evidence of abuse. Emily exhaled, a small weight lifting from her chest. I didn't think I had options. You do, Leah said firmly. But we'll need more. Documentation, witnesses, timestamps. We'll gather everything before the gala. You don't confront him yet. We control the narrative quietly until the truth speaks louder than his lies. Michael leaned forward. I've got access to Coast Guard reports and dock camera archives from that night. My contact confirmed there's footage showing Daniel's motorboat leaving while the storm was active. Leah smiled. Perfect. That's corroboration. Once we have it, we can make this bulletproof. Emily looked at the files, so many pieces of her pain organized into digital order. It was overwhelming, but also empowering. For the first time, she wasn't running from the truth. She was preparing to use it. As the hours passed, they built timelines, sorted screenshots, and logged every message Daniel had ever sent. Each cruel text, each veiled threat, became a brick in the foundation of justice. By evening, Leah packed her briefcase. You'll stay quiet until I say otherwise. No posts, no reactions, no hint that we're preparing anything. He'll think he's in control. That's when men like him get careless. After she left, the house felt lighter, but Emily's mind still spun. She went to the nursery, the soft blue walls, the untouched crib. The air smelled faintly of lavender. She sat on the floor and opened her journal. On the first blank page, she wrote, "For you, my little one, Mommy's learning to fight." Michael stood in the doorway, watching quietly. You okay? She smiled tiredly. For the first time in months, yeah. He nodded. Tomorrow, we'll go to the marina. I want you to see the footage yourself. She closed the journal and looked up at him. And after that? He hesitated, then said softly, we make sure Daniel never hurts you again. Outside, the evening light faded into gold, the bay calm for the first time since the storm. Emily placed her hand on her stomach, feeling the faint kick beneath her palm, a reminder that her fight wasn't just survival anymore. Somewhere across town, Daniel poured himself a drink, unaware that every lie he'd ever told had just been turned into evidence, and his empire of deception was starting to crack. Rain whispered against the kitchen windows that afternoon as Emily waited for the kettle to boil. The day had been spent sorting files and listening to Leah's careful instructions. She was emotionally exhausted, but her resolve had hardened. Every new truth made the next one easier to face. The doorbell rang. She wasn't expecting anyone. When she opened it, a familiar face stood in the rain. Tasha Reynolds, her old friend from nursing school. Emily gasped, "Tasha?" Tasha smiled softly. "You didn't think I'd stay quiet forever, did you?" They hugged, the kind that says more than words. Tasha had always been the grounded one, calm and practical. She smelled faintly of hospital sanitizer and coffee, the scent of a woman who worked hard and loved harder. Inside, Emily poured them tea. Tasha's eyes darted to the faint bruises on her wrists. "He did that, didn't he?" Emily froze, then nodded. "You've heard things?" Tasha sighed. "I've seen things. I worked night shifts at the hospital. Daniel came by weeks before the storm, trying to access your medical records. Said he needed them for insurance updates. He was charming, but I didn't buy it. He asked questions about your anxiety meds, your prenatal checkups, things that weren't his business." Emily's stomach turned. "He was setting me up." "Exactly," Tasha said. "I reported it to the supervisor, but he had lawyers, contacts. They brushed it off." Michael entered from the living room, laptop in hand. "I didn't mean to interrupt," he said politely. "Tasha, this is Michael Rise," Emily said. "He's been helping me." Tasha's eyebrows rose slightly. "The Michael Rise? The tech guy from New York?" He nodded. "I prefer friend." Tasha smirked. "Good. She needs a few of those." They sat together as the kettle hissed, steam curling into the air. Tasha reached into her tote and pulled out a small USB drive. "I made copies of our hospital logs and the security reports. You'll want to show these to your lawyer. There's a timestamp of when Daniel requested access and proof he came back the night of the storm." Emily's breath caught. "He came back?" Tasha nodded grimly. "He was soaking wet, asking if you'd been admitted. When we said no, he smiled like that was good news. I remember thinking, no normal husband smiles like that." Michael plugged the drive into his laptop, the screen filling with files. "This is perfect. Chain of evidence, time-stamped entries. Leah's going to love you, Tasha." Tasha waved him off. "I just want her safe. I've seen too many women disappear in silence." Emily's eyes stung with tears. "You believed me before I even said anything." "I didn't need to hear it," Tasha said softly. "I saw it in your eyes that day at your baby shower, remember? You smiled for the photos, but your hands wouldn't stop shaking." Emily wiped her cheeks, laughing bitterly. "He told everyone it was hormones." "Of course he did," Tasha muttered. Men like that rewrite reality until you question your own heartbeat. Michael's voice broke the silence. Then let's make his version collapse. They spent the next hour scanning the files, connecting dots, building a web of deceit that finally made sense. Piece by piece, the story became undeniable. As dusk fell, the three of them stood by the window. The sky bruised purple over the bay. Emily turned to Tasha. "You could lose your job for this," Tasha shrugged. "I'd rather lose a job than my conscience." Emily hugged her tightly. "Thank you." When Tasha left, Emily lingered by the door, heart swelling with gratitude and pain. "It's strange," she murmured. "For so long, I thought I was alone." Michael looked at her, eyes warm. "You're not alone anymore. You have truth, and people who will fight for it." She nodded, whispering, "Then he won't win." Michael glanced at the laptop where the files glowed softly, undeniable, and deadly. Far across town, Daniel sat in his penthouse, sipping scotch and scrolling through social media, unaware that his empire had just been cracked open by two women he had underestimated. The next morning arrived, sharp and bright, sunlight glinting through the tall windows of the Hamptons' house, as if the world had decided to look innocent again. Emily stood in front of the mirror, brushing her hair with slow, mechanical strokes. Her reflection looked calm, but her pulse thrummed with quiet dread. She knew Daniel would come today. He always came when he felt control slipping. Michael had warned her, he'll try to sweeten the air before the next storm. So she prepared herself, emotionally and strategically. Her phone sat hidden on the bookshelf, recording. Leah had installed a discreet camera on the kitchen counter, tucked behind a vase of lilies. This time, Emily wouldn't be caught off guard. At exactly 10, the sound of tires crunching over gravel echoed outside. The doorbell rang, crisp and confident. She didn't move at first, just listened to the rhythm of her heartbeat before opening the door. Daniel stood there holding a bouquet of white roses and a small blue Tiffany box. He wore a perfectly tailored navy suit, the scent of his cologne clean and sharp, calculated to trigger nostalgia. "You look lovely," he said softly, stepping inside without waiting for permission. Emily crossed her arms. "What do you want?" He smiled, that familiar practiced charm. "I want us to start over. What happened that night, it was chaos. We both made mistakes." She raised an eyebrow. "You tied me to a boat, Daniel. Which part was my mistake?" He sighed dramatically, setting the roses on the counter. "You don't understand what that storm was like for me. I was terrified for you. The waves were—" "Stop." Her voice cracked like a whip. "You left me there. I almost drowned." He froze for a moment, then softened his tone. "Emily, please, you're emotional. I know pregnancy can make everything feel worse. Let's not turn one accident into a war." She almost laughed at the audacity. "An accident?" He took a cautious step closer, lowering his voice. "Look, the press is calling me for interviews. They're curious about the storm couple who survived the bay. This is our chance to turn it around. We do a photo at the Plaza Gala, tell them love conquered fear. You in that blue dress I like, me by your side, clean, unified. It'll all go away." Her stomach churned. He wasn't apologizing. He was rebranding. "You care about your image more than my life," she said quietly. Daniel's smile slipped. "My image keeps this house, Emily, keeps that baby's future comfortable. Don't pretend you don't like nice things." He glanced around, his gaze lingering on the Mont Blanc pen resting by her planner, Michael's pen. "You've had help, haven't you? That tech guy, I saw him leaving here last night." Her pulse jumped, but her face stayed calm. "He's a friend." Daniel's expression darkened. "You're playing a dangerous game. I learned from the best." For a long moment, silence filled the kitchen, thick as fog. Then Daniel forced a thin smile, picking up the Tiffany box. "I bought these for you. Diamond studs. You always said they made you feel elegant." She took the box slowly, opened it, stared at the sparkle, then set it back on the counter. "I don't want gifts. I want honesty." He chuckled, a hollow sound. "You want honesty? Fine. That night, yes, I tied you up. You were hysterical, and I didn't want you to ruin everything. But I was coming back." Her hands trembled slightly. "You said you wanted to talk. Now you have." He waved a hand dismissively. "It's not what it sounds like. Nobody will believe." His phone buzzed on the counter. He didn't notice her glance at it. The screen glowed, already recording. Every word had been captured. "I believe you," she whispered. "For the first time, I believe exactly who you are. Daniel frowned, confused by her tone. What's that supposed to mean? She smiled faintly, something fierce glinting beneath the sadness. It means this conversation's over. He looked around, realizing something too late, the faint red light hidden behind the vase. His face drained. Emily, he started, voice tightening. What did you do? She stepped back, unafraid for the first time. I protected myself. He took a step forward, but she raised her hand. Leave, Daniel, before you add assault to your list. For a tense moment, he stared at her, breathing hard. Then he straightened, smoothing his tie. You'll regret this. Maybe, she said, her voice steady, but you'll answer for it. He walked out, slamming the door so hard the windows shook. Emily leaned against it, trembling, not from fear this time, but from release. Outside, Michael's car waited down the road. He saw Daniel storm away, then glanced at his phone as a new message arrived from her. He confessed, it's done. Across town, Daniel sat in his car gripping the steering wheel, realizing the trap he'd walked into. His own words now the rope around his neck, just like the one he'd tied around hers. The next day, Manhattan glimmered under a cold winter sun. Daniel Brooks walked fast through the glass lobby of his real estate firm on Park Avenue, every click of his polished shoes echoing his impatience. His assistant scrambled to keep up, a folder of contracts in her shaking hands. His phone buzzed nonstop, texts from clients, calls from investors, but he ignored them all. He was trying to act normal, to bury the storm under routine. But the mask was slipping. Inside the conference room, the lender from Crestmont Capital waited with two analysts. They wore serious expressions, the kind Daniel hated, the kind that saw through him. Morning, gentlemen, Daniel said, flashing a grin. Let's talk refinancing. The older analyst cleared his throat. Mr. Brooks, before we proceed, we need to discuss something that came up during review. Daniel sat down, loosening his cufflinks with a casual smile. Of course. The analyst slid a printed sheet across the table. We found a report. Coast Guard log, filed 3 nights ago. Mentions your vessel leaving Sag Harbor during the storm and not returning until after the emergency advisory lifted. Daniel's hand froze midair. What does that have to do with my refinancing? The man leaned forward. Your insurance claim. You filed one that same night for storm-related damage and rescue assistance. The report contradicts that claim. Daniel forced a laugh. Clerical error. You know how the Coast Guard is, slow and sloppy. The younger analyst frowned. We also saw a trending social media clip, your wife's hospital admission photo. Reporters are asking questions. This could hurt your brand, Mr. Brooks. Daniel's smile hardened. I handle my brand. But his phone vibrated again. He glanced at the screen. Vanessa. He silenced it quickly, tucking it face down on the table. The meeting dragged, tension thick as smoke. When it ended, Daniel stepped into the elevator, jaw clenched. As the doors slid shut, he exhaled a curse. Downstairs on the sidewalk, Michael Rise sat in a parked car across the street, watching through tinted windows. He'd come to Manhattan for his own meeting, a breakfast with a board member from his foundation. But seeing Daniel rushing out of Crestmont Capital, pale and rattled, told him something. The cracks were widening. Inside the River Cafe later that afternoon, Michael sipped his espresso opposite a Wall Street philanthropist. The man admired Michael's tech innovations and his quiet charity work. You've got integrity, Rise, the man said. We need more of that around here. Michael smiled faintly. Integrity's expensive, but losing it costs more. They talked about coastal recovery programs, but his mind stayed on Emily. She had texted him that morning. He confessed. Leah has the file. What happens now? He replied simply. We keep building, one step at a time. Across town, Daniel sat in his Mercedes, Scotch flask trembling in his hand. Vanessa's voice came through his Bluetooth speaker, sharp, angry. What's going on, Daniel? Reporters keep calling me. Someone leaked something. Relax, he snapped. It's handled. Handled, she hissed. If this explodes, I'm finished. My sponsors will drop me. You'll be fine, he said, rubbing his temple. We just have to show we're united. There was silence, then her voice turned cold. Maybe it's time I unite with someone else. The call disconnected. Daniel slammed the steering wheel, breath shallow. His empire, his money, his image, his women, was slipping through his fingers, and for the first time, he didn't have a script to control it. That night, he opened his laptop in his penthouse office and typed an email to his lawyer. We need to shut this down. She's recording me. Meanwhile, Michael returned to the Hamptons, headlights sweeping across the driveway. Emily was waiting by the door, her phone in hand. "He's losing control," she said. Michael nodded. "Good. That's when men like him make mistakes." She stepped closer, whispering, "Leah says the next move is public, the gala." He met her gaze, calm and certain. "Then that's where we end this." Far above the city, Daniel stared out his penthouse window, Manhattan lights glittering below like false stars. For the first time, he saw his reflection and didn't recognize the man in the glass. The cracks in his world weren't just in business, they were in him, and soon, everyone else would see them too. The train from Manhattan to Queens rattled softly as Emily pressed her hand against her belly, watching the city blur past the window. It had been weeks since she'd seen her mother. Now, with Leah preparing the case and Daniel growing desperate, she needed something deeper than strategy. She needed strength. Carla Carter was a nurse who'd worked nights for 30 years, raising Emily on faith, thrift, and grit. Her apartment smelled of coffee, lemon cleaner, and resilience. When Emily walked through the door, Carla didn't ask questions. She just opened her arms. "My baby," she whispered, hugging her tightly. "I saw the storm news. You scared me half to death." Emily's voice cracked. "It's worse than the news, Mom." Carla stepped back, studying her daughter's face, the bruises, the haunted eyes. "Sit," she said firmly, guiding Emily to the kitchen table. "Tell me everything." So Emily did. The rope, the betrayal, the prenup, the recording. Every word poured out like water breaking through a dam. By the end, Carla's eyes glistened, her jaw set. "That man doesn't know what he's done," she said quietly. "He doesn't know who he's dealing with." Emily gave a weak laugh. "Mom, he's rich. He knows everyone. He can spin the world." Carla shook her head. "Money doesn't make a man untouchable. Truth does. And you've got that now." She reached across the table, taking Emily's hands. "You always were too gentle for your own good. Even as a little girl, you'd apologize for other people's messes. But this isn't yours to carry." Tears burned Emily's eyes. "I thought if I stayed calm, he'd stop. I thought love could fix him." Carla squeezed her fingers. "Love doesn't fix evil, sweetheart. It only survives it." For a moment, silence filled the room, broken only by the hum of the old refrigerator. Carla stood, walked to a small cabinet, and pulled out a folded blanket. It was pale yellow, crocheted with care. "I made this for the baby," she said softly. "Didn't know when I'd give it to you." Emily pressed the fabric to her face, inhaling the faint scent of lavender. "It's beautiful." Carla smiled sadly. "So are you. You just forgot for a while." The kettle whistled. Carla poured tea, strong and sweet, and handed her daughter a mug. "What's the plan now?" Emily explained. "Leah's strategy. The files, the recordings, the upcoming gala." Carla listened without interrupting, her face unreadable. "Finally," she said, "then you go through with it. You tell the truth where everyone can hear it, and you hold your head high while you do." Emily hesitated. "What if people think I'm lying? What if he ruins me before I even start?" Carla leaned in, her voice firm but tender. "He already ruined your peace. Don't let him ruin your courage too." Emily looked down at the tea, swirling the spoon slowly. Her mother's words settled into her bones like warmth after cold rain. When it was time to leave, Carla walked her to the door, resting a hand on her daughter's cheek. "You'll win this, Emily. Not because you're angry, but because you're right." Emily hugged her tightly. "Thank you, Mom, for everything." Carla chuckled. "Don't thank me yet. You still have to show him what Carter women are made of." As Emily stepped outside, snowflakes drifted through the gray air. She wrapped the blanket around her shoulders, its softness grounding her. She felt lighter, stronger. The baby kicked once, gentle but sure, as if agreeing. That evening, back in Sag Harbor, Michael saw her walking up the path, bundled in the yellow blanket. He smiled. "You look different," he said. "I am," she replied simply. "I went home, and now I'm ready." He nodded, understanding without another word. Far away, Daniel sat in his penthouse, staring at his reflection in the dark window. For the first time, he felt something colder than fear. He felt the certainty that the woman he'd tried to break was coming for him, and she wasn't coming alone. The invitation gleamed under the soft kitchen light, its embossed lettering cold and precise. The Hamptons Coastal Conservation Gala, the Plaza Hotel, Manhattan. The gold trim seemed almost cruel in its perfection. Emily stared at it for a long time, the way someone might study a loaded gun. Michael leaned against the counter, arms crossed, watching her read it again. "He really expects you to show up after everything," he said quietly. Emily nodded. "Of course he does. Daniel doesn't believe anyone can say no to him." Leah's voice came from the speakerphone on the table. "That's exactly why you're going. He's arrogant enough to think he's still in control. That's when we expose him." Emily set the invitation down and rubbed her temples. "It's just, I don't know if I can stand there and smile like nothing happened." Leah's tone softened. "You won't be smiling for him. You'll be standing for yourself and your child." Michael stepped closer. "You'll have security, cameras, press. He won't touch you again." Emily exhaled slowly. "Then we do it." Leah's voice sharpened again, all business. "Here's the plan. Daniel wants the illusion of reconciliation. You give it to him. Just enough. You arrive looking composed, calm, untouchable. Meanwhile, I'll have a contact in the press ready to record everything. When the moment's right, the truth goes public." "And Vanessa?" Michael asked. Leah hesitated. "She'll be there too. Daniel's trying to spin her as part of his community outreach team. We'll use that." Emily's stomach turned at the thought. "He's parading his mistress as his charity partner." Leah's voice was dry. "Hypocrisy photographs well." The line went silent for a moment, filled only by the faint hum of the refrigerator. Then Emily said, "All right, what do I wear to the end of my marriage?" Michael smiled faintly. "Something that tells him he never owned you." 2 days later, Emily stood in front of her mirror as twilight poured through the window. The navy gown Leah had helped her choose flowed around her like midnight silk, modest yet commanding. It framed her pregnancy with quiet dignity rather than weakness. Her hair was swept into a loose chignon, a single silver pendant at her throat, simple, elegant, hers. Michael knocked on the doorframe. "You look unstoppable," he said softly. She smiled, small but real. "You're biased." He shook his head. "No, I just know what it looks like when someone decides they're done being afraid." They drove to Manhattan in silence, headlights carving through the darkness. The city rose ahead, glass towers glowing like constellations. When they pulled up to the plaza, the world was waiting. Cameras flashed, guests shimmered in sequins and tuxedos, the soundtrack of wealth humming beneath chandeliers. Inside, the ballroom glowed gold and white. Daniel was already there, tuxedo perfect, Vanessa gleaming beside him in a silver gown. His smile tightened when he saw Emily enter on Michael's arm. He approached, his charm dialed to maximum. "You came," he said smoothly. Emily met his gaze. "Of course, you wanted your picture-perfect couple." He offered his arm. "Shall we show them we're stronger than rumors?" She hesitated, then took it, her face unreadable. Cameras flashed. The image was captured, husband, wife, and the truth hidden between their smiles. Across the room, Leah stood near the press table, her phone recording discreetly. Michael lingered nearby, pretending to study the silent auction but watching everything. A violinist began to play. Waiters glided by with champagne. Daniel whispered in Emily's ear, "Smile, sweetheart. Tonight, the world remembers who we are." She turned toward him, her eyes like steel. "Oh, they'll remember, Daniel. Just not the way you think." And as the orchestra swelled, Leah's phone vibrated with a text from her contact. "We're live." The countdown to Daniel's public downfall had just begun. Vanessa Hale had always known how to control a room. She could turn a glance into currency, a smile into influence. But lately, even her reflection seemed to argue with her. As she sat at her vanity that morning, brushing her hair in her glass-walled Manhattan condo, she saw something she didn't recognize in the mirror. Fear. Her phone buzzed non-stop. Notifications, headlines, whispers. Rumors swirl around Hampton's power couple ahead of gala. Her name was tagged in half of them. She scrolled through social media, fingers trembling. The comments under her latest post, once filled with admiration, now read like judgment. Homewrecker. Liar. Gold digger. She threw the phone onto the bed and stared at her reflection again. For years she'd built her brand on being untouchable. Now she looked tired. The doorbell rang. Daniel stood outside her condo, sunglasses on, holding a Starbucks cup like a peace offering. He looked as handsome as ever, but his charm felt brittle. "You're still mad," he said, stepping inside before she could refuse. "You told me this was handled," she snapped. "Now reporters are calling my PR team asking about a storm incident. What did you do?" He set the coffee on the counter, jaw tightening. "Nothing's wrong. The gala will fix it." We'll show them we're all working together. Philanthropy, forgiveness, whatever sells. She laughed bitterly. You think people are going to forgive you because of a charity event? He smiled without warmth. They'll forgive what they're told to forgive. She turned away, pacing. You tied your pregnant wife to a boat, Daniel. Even you can't spin that forever. His eyes darkened. Careful. Her stomach clenched. He'd never raised a hand to her, but there was something colder about his voice now, something final. You think I don't know what happened that night? She whispered. I saw you come back drenched. I heard you say she was taken care of. He looked at her sharply. You were happy to believe it then? Because I thought she was fine, she said, tears welling. Because I believed you. He stepped closer. And you still will. Because if this story spreads, you're finished too. Your sponsors, your brand, everything. You'll vanish before summer. She swallowed hard. He was right. They were tied together now, not by love, but by mutually assured destruction. When he left, Vanessa sank onto the couch, her hands shaking. Her phone buzzed again. It was a message from an unknown number. Truth always finds the surface. You should talk before it swallows you too. Attached was a single still image, Daniel tying the rope around Emily's wrist, time-stamped from the marina camera. Her blood ran cold. She stared at it, unable to breathe. Someone had sent proof. She didn't know who. Michael? Leah? The police? But she knew what it meant. Her chest tightened with guilt. She'd laughed that night. She'd watched the storm from a dry, safe dock while Emily fought for her life. The memory burned through her like acid. She went to her balcony, overlooking the Manhattan skyline. Below, people looked small, unburdened. She envied them. Her phone buzzed again. Daniel this time. Pick out something silver for tonight. We shine together or sink together. She typed a reply, deleted it, then wrote again. You should be afraid, Daniel. She hit send before she could think. Hours later, she stood before her closet, fingers brushing the fabric of her gowns. The silver one shimmered under the light, the same color as deceit. She pulled it down anyway. When she arrived at the plaza, flashes exploded like gunfire. Cameras captured her beside Daniel, their smiles brittle, their hands too stiff to pass for love. Somewhere in the crowd, she spotted Emily across the ballroom, calm, radiant, untouchable. For the first time, Vanessa felt the weight of what she'd helped destroy. As she lifted her champagne glass, her phone buzzed again. A second photo, clearer this time, Daniel's face illuminated by lightning as he tied the rope. And beneath it, one line, your silence is next. The morning of the gala arrived with a deceptive calm. The sun glowed softly over Sag Harbor, painting the waves gold as if pretending nothing dark had ever happened there. Inside Emily's house, however, the air hummed with tension and purpose. Her living room had transformed into a quiet command center, laptops open, documents stacked, and 3 determined faces planning the end of a lie. Leah Kim stood at the table, sleeves rolled up, her voice steady as steel. Tonight's not about revenge, she said. It's about truth. Once Daniel sees he's being outplayed, he'll panic. That's when people believe the worst version of themselves. That's when he'll bury himself. Michael leaned over the table, scrolling through digital folders on his MacBook Pro. We've got everything ready. Camera footage from the marina, the Coast Guard's timestamp, hospital records, and both audio files, his threat and his confession. All synced to go live once Leah gives the signal. Emily sat quietly on the couch, hands resting on her stomach. She could feel her baby move beneath her fingers, steady and strong. Are you sure this will hold up in court? She asked softly. Leah nodded. It'll do more than hold. It'll end him. Tasha entered from the kitchen with a tray of coffee. And if he tries to twist things again? She asked. Leah smiled faintly. Then he can explain why he tied a pregnant woman to a boat during a storm. Judges tend to frown on that. The room filled with a short, nervous laugh, the kind that releases pressure before something big. Michael looked at Emily. You don't have to speak tonight, he said. You can let the evidence speak for you. Emily shook her head. No, I have to. If I don't tell my story, he still wins. He'll always say I was too fragile, too emotional. He's built his power on my silence. Tonight, that ends. Her words hung in the air like a vow. Leah checked her watch. All right, logistics. I'll be at the plaza early, near the press entrance. Michael, you stay close to Emily, but don't shadow her. It'll draw attention. Tasha, you're our backup. Keep your phone on. If anything goes wrong, security moves in. Tasha nodded firmly. Got it. As they went through the checklist, Emily's gaze wandered to the framed photograph on the mantel. Her wedding day. Daniel's hand rested on her shoulder, his smile perfect, his eyes empty. She took the frame, turned it face down, and exhaled. By noon, Leah left to meet the press contact. Michael packed the equipment, hard drives, encrypted USBs, and backup copies hidden in a leather case. Tasha folded the evidence copies into her purse. Every detail had been rehearsed. When the house finally quieted, Michael joined Emily on the porch. The ocean stretched before them, calm and blue, as if mocking the chaos to come. You ready? He asked. She looked out at the water. I thought I'd be terrified, she said, but I'm not. I'm tired of being scared of him. He smiled gently. You know, you don't have to be perfect tonight. Just honest. She turned to him, eyes soft but resolute. Honesty is all I've got left. They sat in silence for a while, the sound of distant gulls filling the air. Finally, Michael reached into his jacket and handed her something small, a black Mont Blanc pen. I want you to sign your statement with this, he said. The first deal I ever made that mattered, I signed with this pen. It felt like claiming my life. Do the same. She took it, holding it between her fingers like a talisman. Thank you, she whispered. He smiled. For what? For believing in me when I couldn't. As afternoon turned to evening, the black car arrived to take them to Manhattan. Emily took one last look at her home, the soft blue walls, the folded baby blanket, the quiet peace she'd fought so hard to earn. Then she straightened her shoulders and walked toward the car. And as the door closed behind her, lightning flashed faintly over the distant ocean. Not the storm that once tried to end her, but the one she was about to unleash. Tonight, the truth would finally take the stage. The Plaza Hotel sparkled like a crown against the New York skyline that night. Its chandeliers glowed with golden light, limousines lined Fifth Avenue, and flashes from photographers lit the marble entrance like lightning. The city had gathered for glamour, charity, and spectacle. But no one knew they were about to witness a reckoning. Emily stepped out of the black sedan, her navy gown gliding against the carpet as if the storm of her past had never touched her. Michael exited beside her, his expression calm but alert. Cameras turned instantly. Reporters whispered her name, Emily Brooks, the wife who'd nearly drowned. She kept her chin high. Inside, the ballroom pulsed with polite laughter and champagne bubbles. Wealth shimmered. Crystal glasses, silk gowns, tailored tuxedos. The theme was resilience in the wake of the storm. The irony made Emily's stomach twist. Daniel stood near the stage, every inch the perfect husband. His tuxedo was custom, his smile polished. Beside him, Vanessa gleamed in silver, her lips curved in something that wasn't quite confidence. When Daniel spotted Emily across the room, his smile widened. He handed Vanessa a glass and crossed the floor with rehearsed ease. Emily, he said warmly, kissing her cheek for the cameras. You look breathtaking. Her pulse drummed. Thank you. She replied, steady. You always liked the illusion of perfection. He chuckled softly, whispering near her ear, Careful, darling, not tonight. Leah, standing near the press table, gave a discreet nod to Michael. Everything was in place. Cameras hidden, drives ready, press streaming live. The trap was set. Ladies and gentlemen, the host announced from the stage, voice echoing across the ballroom, please welcome our honorary co-chairs, Daniel and Emily Brooks, a couple who know firsthand the power of survival and love. Applause, flashbulbs. A dozen microphones pointed at them. Daniel offered his arm. Shall we? Emily smiled faintly, slipping her hand through. Let's give them a show. They walked onto the stage. Daniel adjusted the microphone, his voice smooth as ever. Good evening, friends. Tonight is about hope after hardship. My wife and I, well, we've weathered storms literally and metaphorically. Laughter rippled. But love, he continued, love always brings us back to shore. Emily stared at him, stunned by the gall of it. He was rewriting their nightmare into poetry. When the applause settled, Daniel gestured for her to speak. Emily, say a few words. Her fingers brushed the pendant at her neck. She took the microphone slowly. Yes, she said, her voice calm. Storms do test love, but sometimes they reveal the truth behind it. A murmur moved through the room. Daniel's smile stiffened. Sweetheart, Leah's voice echoed in Michael's earpiece. Now. The giant projection screen behind them flickered to life. At first, it showed waves, then a timestamp. Sag Harbor Marina, 9:47 p.m. The crowd hushed. The video played, grainy but clear enough. Daniel Brooks on the dock. Lightning flashed, his hands tying a rope around his wife's wrists. Gasps rippled through the ballroom. Vanessa's glass slipped from her hand, shattering on the marble floor. Daniel spun toward Leah, fury twisting his face. "Turn that off," he shouted. The next clip began. His voice from the secret recording, low and venomous. "You'll keep quiet or you'll have nothing." The audience fell into stunned silence. Cameras clicked wildly. A reporter whispered, "Is this real?" Emily stepped back, letting the truth play. She didn't need to explain. Daniel's mask crumbled. "This is manipulation," he barked. "She's unstable, she's always been." Michael moved forward, standing between him and Emily. "Enough." Security guards approached, discreet but firm. Leah handed a flash drive to a waiting journalist. Emily looked at Daniel one last time. "You taught me something," she said softly. "Storms don't destroy people, they expose them." He stared at her, speechless, as the press surged forward. And as flashes exploded around her like lightning reborn, Emily realized this wasn't just the night she reclaimed her voice. It was the night the world finally heard it. The ballroom erupted in chaos. For a full 5 seconds after the video ended, there was only stunned silence. No clinking glasses, no polite applause, no music. Then the whispers began, spreading like wildfire through silken sequins. "Did you see that? Was that real? Oh my God, that was him." Daniel's face drained of color. His carefully curated charm dissolved into raw panic. He lunged for the microphone, voice trembling between anger and desperation. "This is fake. She's sick. She's been unstable for months." Emily didn't flinch. She stood center stage, every inch of her steady under the blinding lights. "That's what he said to the doctors, to the police, to anyone who might listen. That I was crazy. But storms don't lie. Cameras don't lie." The crowd gasped again as Leah tapped her phone. The large screen behind them switched to a second video, his recorded confession from the kitchen, his voice cold and clear. "Yes, I tied you up. You were hysterical, and I didn't want you to ruin everything." Daniel froze. His voice filled the room, betraying him in real time. The audience stared in horror. Vanessa covered her mouth, tears spilling down her cheeks. She whispered something that sounded like, "Oh, God." Leah stepped from the crowd, her posture unshakable. "These recordings are verified," she announced. "Time-stamped, authenticated, and shared with authorities." Daniel turned on her, his voice cracking. "You can't do this. This is slander." Leah's tone was ice. "Truth isn't slander." Flashbulbs burst around them. Reporters surged forward shouting questions. "Mr. Brooks, did you tie your wife up? Mrs. Brooks, how long were you trapped? Do you plan to press charges?" Daniel's mask shattered. He grabbed the mic again, voice shaking. "You people don't understand. She's lying for attention." "She's enough." Emily's voice cut through the noise, calm but sharp as glass. "You've been lying for years. You lied about who you were, what you wanted, and who you loved. But the truth doesn't need your permission anymore." Michael moved subtly to her side, protective but silent, as security closed in around Daniel. The crowd parted, unwilling to touch him. Then, from the corner of the ballroom, a sudden sound, heels clicking fast across marble. Vanessa. Her silver gown shimmered under the chandeliers as she stepped forward, tears streaking her mascara. "It's true," she said shakily. "I saw him that night. I didn't stop him. I should have, but I was a coward." The room fell silent again. Daniel's head snapped toward her, disbelief and fury mingling. "Vanessa, shut up!" She shook her head. "No, you tied her. You left her. And you came to me like it was nothing." Her voice broke. "I can't live with that anymore." A collective murmur rippled through the crowd. Cameras turned to Vanessa as she sobbed into her hands. Leah nodded to security. "Take him out." 2 men in black suits approached Daniel, who tried to pull away, his words dissolving into angry fragments. "You'll regret this. You'll all regret this." No one answered. Emily stood motionless, watching as he was escorted out of the ballroom. For a moment she almost didn't recognize him. The man who'd once seemed invincible now looked small, cornered, and utterly alone. When he was gone, the room's tension finally broke. Reporters flooded forward, microphones raised, questions flying. Emily turned away from them, tears glimmering but unshed. Leah placed a hand on her shoulder. "It's over," she whispered. Emily shook her head. "No, it's just begun. Now I rebuild." Michael stepped closer, his voice quiet. "You just changed everything. She exhaled shakily, looking up at the grand chandelier glittering above. "I didn't want revenge," she said softly. "I just wanted the truth to breathe." And as applause began, slow, hesitant, but growing, Emily realized she wasn't the broken woman from the storm anymore. She was the calm that followed it. The night wasn't her ending. It was her beginning. The next morning, New York woke up to headlines that cut sharper than any knife. Storm wife exposes real estate mogul in live gala scandal. Daniel Brooks' empire sinks overnight. Every major network replayed the footage. The rope, the confession, the moment he lost control, on endless loop. In her quiet Sag Harbor home, Emily sat at the kitchen table, a cup of coffee cooling beside her. The baby shifted beneath her ribs, a tiny reminder that life continued even after chaos. She scrolled through her phone. Messages from strangers, survivors, women thanking her for speaking up. Each note felt like a piece of light breaking through months of darkness. Leah called early, her voice crisp and satisfied. "He's been arrested for false insurance claims and endangerment. The Coast Guard report helped more than we hoped. The DA's moving fast." Emily blinked, stunned. "He's in custody already?" Leah chuckled. "Turns out lying on national television doesn't impress investors or law enforcement." Emily smiled faintly. "What about Vanessa?" "Cooperating," Leah said. "She gave a full statement. Her testimony confirms everything. She's not innocent, but she's trying to make it right." Emily sighed. Maybe she finally remembered she's human. After hanging up, Emily stepped outside. The air smelled like salt and pine, clean and new. Across the street, a news van idled, reporters hoping for a quote. Michael appeared from his car, holding 2 paper cups of Starbucks coffee. "They're vultures," he said softly, nodding toward the cameras. She took the cup, smiling. "Let them circle. I'm not hiding anymore." He looked at her for a long moment. "You realize you changed the narrative, right? Women everywhere are talking about you. You're not just a story, you're a movement now." She shook her head. "I didn't want to be a symbol, I just wanted to survive." "Maybe both can happen," he said. They walked down to the dock where it had all begun. The winter wind tugged at her hair, but the sea was calm, glassy, forgiving. She stopped near the post, where Daniel had tied the rope months earlier. The old frayed line still hung there, stiff with salt. Without speaking, Michael untied it, coiling it neatly before tossing it into a trash bin. "Closure," he said simply. She looked out across the water, eyes glistening. "For a long time I thought the storm was my punishment, but maybe it was my warning." Michael glanced at her. "A warning?" "To stop loving people who confuse power with love," she smiled. "Then you learned faster than most." Her phone buzzed again. A message from Leah. "Press wants a statement." "Up to you." Emily hesitated. "What do I even say?" Michael thought for a moment. "Tell them the truth. That's what you've been doing all along." She opened the Notes app and typed slowly. "To everyone who's watched my story, this isn't about revenge. It's about remembering that silence protects the wrong people. If you're in your own storm, hold on. The tide always turns." She hit send. Within minutes, it was everywhere. Her words were quoted on morning shows, shared across social media, and reposted by advocacy groups. People called it the Tide Statement. Later that afternoon, Leah arrived with legal papers. The judge granted a restraining order and froze his assets. "You'll have full custody once the divorce finalizes." Emily exhaled deeply, almost dizzy with relief. "So it's really over," Leah nodded. "He'll face trial. But for you, it's over." When Leah left, Michael lingered on the porch. The sky was streaked pink and gold, soft and forgiving. He looked at her, eyes warm. "You okay?" She nodded, touching her stomach. "I think we finally are." As the sun sank below the horizon, Daniel Brooks sat alone in a holding cell, staring at his reflection in a cracked window. For the first time, there were no cameras, no lies, no audience. Only silence. The storm he had created had finally swallowed him whole. The courthouse in Riverhead didn't have chandeliers or velvet carpets like the plaza. Its walls were plain, its benches hard, and its air smelled faintly of old paper and coffee. But to Emily, it was the most sacred place she'd stood in months, because here, finally, truth mattered more than money. Snow fell softly outside as she walked through the doors, the sound of cameras muffled by the weather. Leah walked beside her, confident as ever, files tucked neatly under her arm. Michael followed a few steps behind, silent but steady, his eyes never leaving her. Inside the courtroom, Daniel Brooks sat at the defendant's table, pale and restless. The sharp suit was gone, replaced by a plain gray jacket. His once perfect posture slumped slightly, like a man who had finally seen the edges of his empire crumble. Across from him sat his lawyer, a polished Manhattan defense attorney whose voice carried the easy arrogance of someone used to buying silence. When the judge entered, the room rose. The proceedings began. Leah called her first witness, Tasha. The nurse stepped up, chin high. She spoke clearly about Daniel's attempts to access Emily's hospital records, about the night he'd shown up soaked, asking if Emily had been admitted. Her voice never wavered. "He smiled when we said she wasn't there," she said quietly. The courtroom murmured. Next came the Coast Guard officer, reading from the storm log. Mr. Brooks's vessel departed Sag Harbor Marina at 9:46 p.m. despite small craft warnings. No distress call was made. He returned after midnight. Then the neighbor whose dock camera captured the footage. The screen lit up once again. Daniel tying the rope, lightning flashing behind him. The jury shifted uncomfortably. The truth didn't need embellishment. Finally, Leah called Emily. She stood, adjusting the hem of her navy dress, and walked to the stand. Every step felt like a heartbeat. When she sat down, the courtroom seemed to shrink until only the judge, the jury, and Daniel existed. Leah's voice softened. "Mrs. Brooks, can you tell the court what happened the night of the storm?" Emily took a deep breath. "He said he was worried about me panicking, but he wasn't worried. He wanted me out of the way." Her hands trembled slightly as she continued. "He tied me to the mast. I begged him to stop, to think about our baby. He didn't. He left." Leah nodded gently. "And how were you rescued?" "Michael Reyes," she said. "He saw my phone light from across the bay and swam through the storm to save me." A murmur rippled through the room. Daniel's lawyer objected, claiming dramatization, but the judge overruled him. Leah pressed on. "Why didn't you come forward sooner?" Emily looked directly at Daniel. "Because I thought silence was safer. He made me believe speaking up would destroy me. But silence was destroying me faster." Daniel shifted in his seat, jaw tight. His lawyer whispered frantically, but he ignored him. When his turn to speak came, Daniel rose, his tone suddenly calm. "Your Honor, my wife exaggerates. I made mistakes, yes, but never harm. She's emotional, pregnant, influenced." Leah stood instantly. "Objection, victim blaming." "Sustained," the judge said sharply. Leah walked to the center of the room. "Mr. Brooks, if you're so innocent, why did you confess on tape?" His composure cracked. "You manipulated that recording." "Your own words, sir," Leah interrupted. "Time-stamped, verified, and authenticated." Daniel's face reddened. "You don't understand. She would have left me." The courtroom went silent. Leah looked at the jury. "Exactly." By afternoon, closing statements were done. The judge recessed for an hour before delivering his ruling. Emily sat on the bench outside, Michael beside her, Leah pacing nearby. Snow continued to fall beyond the tall courthouse windows, each flake dissolving on the glass. When the judge returned, everyone stood. His voice was calm but final. "Given the overwhelming evidence, the court grants full protection and custody to Mrs. Brooks. Charges against Mr. Brooks will proceed to criminal trial." Emily's knees nearly buckled, but Michael's hand found hers, grounding her. Leah exhaled a long, slow breath. Daniel sat frozen, eyes empty. The gavel struck once. The sound echoed like thunder fading after a storm. As the courtroom emptied, Emily looked toward the window where snow met light and realized the storm had finally ended, not outside, but inside her. For the first time in years, peace didn't feel borrowed. It felt earned. Spring came early that year. The ocean outside Emily's cottage shimmered under a calm blue sky, and for the first time in what felt like forever, the air smelled like possibility instead of fear. The storm had passed, literally and figuratively, and the woman who once trembled at every sound now woke each morning to the laughter of her daughter and the peace of her own heartbeat. The baby's name was Grace. She had her mother's eyes and her father's determination, Michael's, not Daniel's. He was there the day she was born, quiet tears in his eyes as Emily whispered, "You saved me twice." Now, months later, life had found its rhythm again. Emily worked part-time for a small nonprofit Leah helped her join, an organization dedicated to protecting women from domestic abuse. Her days were filled with meetings, nursery rhymes, and the hum of a coffee maker instead of lawyers and police calls. On a warm Saturday morning, she stood in her backyard garden, watching Grace toddle across the grass in a yellow sun hat. The baby squealed at a butterfly, unsteady but fearless. Michael sat nearby, repairing a wooden chair, sleeves rolled up, sunlight glinting off his wristwatch. He looked up and smiled. "She's going to run before she walks." Emily laughed. "Just like her mother." He set the hammer down and crossed to her. "You've built something beautiful here, you know that?" She looked around. The cottage, the roses, the calm waves beyond the dunes. "It doesn't feel real sometimes. After everything, peace feels like a luxury." "It's not a luxury," he said softly. "It's what you earned." She turned to face him fully. "You never asked for anything in return." He shrugged, eyes warm. "I didn't do it for something back. I did it because you were worth saving." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The wind rustled through the garden, carrying the faint sound of Grace's laughter. Later that afternoon, Emily sat at her writing desk, penning a letter addressed to the women who'd written her since the trial. Strangers who had survived their own storms. Her words flowed steady and honest. "You don't have to be unbroken to be strong. Some of us are rebuilt piece by piece, and that's still strength. The tide doesn't erase what it touches, but it cleans what it can. Don't be afraid to start over. You deserve the shore." She signed it with the Mont Blanc pen Michael had given her, the same one she'd used to sign her testimony months before. It had become a symbol now, not of business or wealth, but of truth. Outside, a delivery truck rumbled up the road. The driver handed her a small envelope. Inside was a check from the sale of Daniel's seized assets. Court-ordered compensation. She stared at the number, the irony hitting her like a wave. The man who tried to buy her silence had, in the end, paid for her freedom. That evening, as sunset painted the sky pink and gold, Emily and Michael took Grace to the beach. The water was cool, calm, forgiving. Grace giggled as tiny waves lapped at her toes. Michael glanced at the horizon. "Do you ever think about that night?" Emily shook her head gently. "No, I think about this one." He smiled. "And tomorrow?" She slipped her hand into his. "Tomorrow's just another tide." They stood together as the sun dipped below the water, the ocean stretching endless and peaceful before them. Emily felt Grace's small hand clutch her finger, grounding her in the present. She exhaled, every breath free from fear, every heartbeat her own. Behind her, the house lights glowed warm against the darkening sky. Inside waited a future she had built with her own courage, a home filled with laughter, safety, and love. And as the last wave kissed the shore, Emily Carter realized something she'd never truly believed before. The storm hadn't destroyed her. It had delivered her to herself. So that's how the story ends. And if you're still here right now, my friend, it means something in Emily's journey has touched your heart in a quiet, personal way. Maybe it's the way she found peace after the storm, or how she learned that surviving isn't about being unbroken. It's about rebuilding, one honest step at a time. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." And that's exactly what Emily did. She stopped trying to control the storm and started steering her own ship. Maybe you faced your own kind of storm. Loss, betrayal, fear. But remember, the waves that try to drown you can also carry you to a new shore. Healing isn't loud. It's quiet mornings, small victories, and choosing yourself every single day. If this story reminded you that pain can lead to purpose, then don't leave quietly. Tap that like button, share this story with someone who needs hope tonight, and subscribe so we can keep telling the kind of stories that help hearts heal. You're not alone. Your tide will turn too.